For a lot of people, they remember 2008, 2009, the economy and how it was. I got let go from my job in 2009. I was looking for my next opportunity. For 6 months, I'm looking for work and nobody was hiring. One day I just woke up and I said, you know what, I'm done. I'm gonna start my own business. A CPA should be able to do 3 things for you: help you to make more money, save more money, and help you to save time. If you have debt, personally, is not the greatest thing. Whenever you take on personal debt, what's the return on investment that you're getting? I look at money as a tool to help you to have a better life. If you use it wisely, it can greatly enrich your life, but also not only your life, the people around you. I think a lot of times we have the willingness to do more. How can I impact others? How can I be a blessing to others? And as I do that, the money is just gonna flow. You can't get to 10 million in revenue without a team. There's a lot of people we work with that are like, oh, I don't wanna hire people. Well, you're never gonna necessarily grow to your true capacity.
All right, y'all. Well, welcome to another episode of the Blueprint Podcast. Today, we are talking about keys to make more money and keeping that in your pocket. I'm your host, Michael Carpenter. I'm a podcaster and real estate agent, and I'm here to help you build the blueprint that God has for your life so that you can achieve all that He has for you. The 3 topics that we talk about on this podcast are faith, family, and real estate. Today, we have a special guest who came highly regarded. 2 of our previous guests highly recommended this guest, so we had to get him on. We have Mr. Ephraim Egbele on the show. Business growth CPA, helping people, million-dollar entrepreneurs increase profits, manage cash flow so they can leverage their business to create lasting wealth.
Yes.
Instagram bio right there, man. That's fire.
I love it.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you, in your own words, introduce yourself, tell our audience what you do and what you're about.
Yeah. So my name is Ephraim Egbele. I'm a CPA based out of Houston, Texas. Originally from the Dallas Metroplex. Okay. Grew up in Irving, Texas. Went to high school there, junior high, elementary, all that. Then I came here to Houston for college. Went to University of Houston. I just never went back.
Okay.
My family's still there. You know, so it's a drive away, like 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
So it's not too far.
Yeah.
But Houston is pretty much home now.
Yeah.
And after I graduated from college, I went into corporate America, worked for a big accounting firm called PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Got it.
Was there for a few years. And then, for a lot of people, they remember 2008, 2009, the economy and how it was.
Yeah.
I got let go from my job in 2009. So I was one of the many people that got let go. And, I was looking for my next opportunity.
Right.
So for 6 months, I'm looking for work, trying to find my next job, and nobody was hiring. Like, I'm going into interviews and I'm talking to the people and I'm giving my best foot forward, and they're like, we like you, and I'm thinking, okay, they're going to call me back, and never received any calls back, right?
Yeah.
So for 6 months, that was going on. And then one day I just woke up and I said, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to start my own business. And I started like a tax company out in Rosenberg. So, think of like H&R Block. It's a similar type of concept where you have an office and people come in and do their taxes with you. And so did that for a long time. And then a lot of the people that were coming in were small business owners. So we were doing like 800 returns a year for people, but probably about 25% of them owned businesses. And they were like, look, Ephraim, we enjoy the tax services that you're giving us, but we need more. Is there anything else that you can provide? And so, I thought about it. I was like, you know what? I see where the industry is going. Everything is slanting towards TurboTax, right? So people are doing their taxes from home more. Yeah. So I need to, be proactive and pivot before I get impacted. Yeah. And I'm looking at my numbers every year, and my revenue is going down little by little. Man. I'm like, it's time to make that change. Yeah. So I pivoted into working with small businesses. Okay. We started, simple, like doing bookkeeping and things like that for them. And then over time, I started to realize, like, you know what? I have a good penchant for advisory. Like advising people on how to grow their business, on how to manage their money. Yeah. So then we turned into a fractional CFO firm, and that's what we are today. Okay. So we have about 70, 80 clients that we work with on a regular basis, and it's been good. It's been a good time. I think the impact of what we do is the biggest reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into some more of that. I'm a personal client, and so I've been in the business, so I've gotten to be able to see it. That's something I really appreciate about the Blueprint Podcast is I'm bringing people on here that like, hey, I'm patron businesses, you know what I mean? So, if you're looking for your CPA, definitely here's your guy. Can definitely attest to the work that you and your team are doing. I haven't worked directly with you, but obviously someone on your team, and that's been good. Okay. So like I said at the intro, the 3 pillars that we talk about on the Blueprint Podcast are faith, family, and real estate, right? And so every episode has all three, but we got to have one of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so out of those three, which one do you want to start off with today as kind of to lead into the conversation?
Yeah. Let's start off with family.
Okay, let's go family. Okay,
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. Family. We're in 3 months into 2025.
Mm-hmm.
We have a new administration. Culturally, I think the U.S. is going through a shift, right? What's socially acceptable to communicate out loud on social media, in offices, is changing because of leadership of the country has kind of established a baseline, right? And we're familiar with that, right? We've seen that happen. How are you leading your family through kind of a changing political and cultural time where, I think how we treat people is kind of, we're like losing that, that dignity that we give to other people. And I know that has to filter down into family units, into how kids treat each other, bullying, things like that. How are you kind of leading your family through this?
Yeah. So I have a beautiful wife and 2 6-year-old boys, twin boys.
Yeah.
And, we have these conversations in-house, right?
Yeah.
Where we see the change of the climate of politically.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's all about teaching them, like, look, even though things are changing, we still need to maintain who we are as people individually, which is Christ-centered, good people.
Yeah.
So we need to treat people with respect,
Right.
no matter what background, no matter what gender, whatever it is that you come from.
Yeah.
You have to treat people with respect, because people that you treat badly, you don't know what could happen, like where they could be. They could end up being someone that you work for, and now they're returning the favor, right? We've seen that so many times on, like, I think it's Jerry. What was it? The show? Jerry Springer.
Jerry Springer,
right?
yeah.
Where I think it's a show where you have people that would come back and they would have this makeover of who they were, then, now, and whatever. And they'd bring back that high school bully and then, say, hey, look at me now, or whatever, right? So, I think for me, it's all about really respect first, and also being culturally acceptable, right? So understanding people's cultures. We met with one of my boys' teachers the other day, and one of the things that she said that made me feel extremely happy was, he takes the culture, right? So the school that he goes to is very culturally diverse. So many cultures and countries represented in the school.
Okay.
And in his class, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, man, whenever they have different topics around different countries, he's like first in line to like learn about it. He's eager. He's asking questions.
Yeah.
He's even whenever we mispronounce words at home,
Yeah.
he's correcting us. And he's 6,
Yeah.
right? So
Okay.
it's I love his passion for culture and I love to see that. So those are the things that we really stand on.
Yeah. So what are some practical things you are doing on a daily or weekly basis to train your kids? Because he's obviously learning that somewhere, right? Obviously, he's probably got something that's, just innate, but also like what are some of the things you are teaching, from a practical standpoint?
Yeah, I know one of the things that we're real big on is travel.
Okay.
Right. So taking the kids and ourselves to different countries and for them to experience different things. We've been to Mexico, obviously, it's not too far. We've been to Jamaica. We've been to Nigeria and Africa, and hopefully we'll be able to take them to Europe and other continents.
Yeah.
So especially now that they're 6, they're able to really communicate better and see different things. So they're going to be, exposing them to different things, exposing them to different foods as well, right? So that they can understand different cuisines. And, as they get older, their palate is not just centered on American food or Nigerian food, right? So those are the things that we like to focus on.
That's awesome. Yeah, I grew up in high school. I went on a mission trip every summer. And
nice.
Some of the most formative years of my life, because we would go on these mission trips and we had to pay for them. So I remember the trip we took to Uganda was like $5,000 per person, per kid, right? Yeah. And I had to raise $5,000 as a 15-year-old, right? So can you imagine raising money to go serve somebody else? That's crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And at the time, I was kind of like, yo, we're going to Africa. Like, I just wanted to go, right?
Yeah.
Looking back on it now, I'm like, wow, how formative was that? Like, what was that doing to my psyche to understand that, hey, I'm going to serve other people, and not even to just look down on them because of poverty or whatever, because that's a human being, right? And so, that's something I always, encourage people to do is, hey, go find other ways to serve people. You don't necessarily have to leave the country. In Houston, just drive down 59 and you will find whole, what they call it, the Gandhi district, where there's just so many different nationalities, so many different ways you can meet people, get unique food. So that's something that I think is unique about here. And I think we're a little bit spoiled in terms of that, because I think other parts of the country don't have the kind of diversity we have. So for me, it's not uncommon to walk into a park and hear somebody speaking a different language.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's just what it is here, right? Yeah. So I think that's definitely, I'm sure it's easier here than it could be, you know, the other parts of the country. So,
yeah.
Okay. So you're a CPA. So let's talk about money. Let's get into it.
Let's jump.
So what is your philosophy on money and why?
Yeah, I look at money as a tool to help you to have a better life.
Okay.
Right? And so when I say better life, having better experiences, making things easier in your life, things of that nature, right? So the money is a tool to help you to do those things.
Okay.
I know for me growing up, I used to be real into material things, you know, like I think a lot of us in high school, right? Like you're buying the latest clothes and things like that.
What's your vice? What's your thing? You a watch guy, shoes? What's your thing?
Right now at this moment?
Well, I guess, in general,
Yeah. I would say, well, my vice honestly is like good food and travel.
Okay.
But like when it comes to material stuff, clothing, I guess, it's definitely my thing for sure.
Got it. I cut you off, so go ahead.
But no. So, you know, money is a tool. So if you use it wisely, it can greatly enrich your life, but also not only your life, the people around you, lives as well.
Yeah.
You know, but when you spend it unwisely, then now you don't get to see the fruits of it.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Was there anything in your life that informed that, like, any childhood experiences, anything? Obviously, you kind of talked a little bit about kind of just earlier in life, just kind of spending money just on the material things. Was there anything else in your life that helped formulate kind of how you view money in, as a philosophy?
Yeah. I would say upbringing, you know, like my parents and myself are Nigerian, right?
Okay.
So, you know, going to Nigeria, I remember going at 9 years old and seeing, you know, how the environment was, you know, and it's like, you know what, there are people that don't have the opportunity that you have here, you know, so taking advantage of that opportunity and being able to have that money to be able to help them or to help people that are less fortunate. Yeah. I think really like made me think of money differently. Okay. But then also like just in your environment, the different struggles that people have with money, you know, and seeing that and saying, you know what, I got to figure this out, because if I don't figure this out, this might continue, right? And or what if I figure this out and I'm able to help a lot of people that are having struggles with money? You know, what could that do for the community and just people in general? Gotcha.
So how do we keep more money in our pocket, and how do we be better steward of our finances? I think this is something I've talked about. I don't know that I've really talked about it as much on the podcast, but definitely offline have talked about it extensively. The experience we had from 2020 to 2025 was 2020 was a hard year. Obviously, the pandemic. We got government subsidies. There was the PPP. There was, you know, all the different things that the government did to kind of stimulate the economy. And I think a lot of Americans just went and spent it. That's just kind of what we do, right? Like, we just spend money. But what happened was, I think people continued to spend. And then as the economy, you know, 2021, 22, 23 kind of started to kind of take, you know, I guess what some people say more stabilized, or, you know, what camp you're in on that, it changed, but our spending habits didn't change. So now we're sitting in an environment where 2024, 2025, a lot of my clients on the real estate side are people who are struggling with credit issues. People are even high earners or high DTI. Like, we're trying to balance money, right? So I guess what are your kind of your thoughts on that? You know, how can we be better stewards of our finances in this season?
Yeah, so it's two parts to it, right? Because you have the personal finance and you have the business finance. Okay. So from a personal finance, even business, number one, getting great at generating revenue and money. Okay. You know, so if you don't have a business, you know, how can I be the best at what I do at work? Right. So now I'm always going to be the one that gets the raises, that gets the bonuses, right? Because now that's more money that comes into my household that I can now do things with, right? Yeah. And so in your business, how can you be the best at what you do in your business? Yeah. And so now if you are the best and you give more value, now the money just automatically comes your way. So now the money's coming your way, and now spending it more wisely, right? So for a lot of people, a budget would make sense, right? So looking at historically, let's say the last 6 to 12 months of spending and doing an average, right? So on average, I'm spending, let's say, $1,000 a month on food. I'm spending $2,000 a month on rent, you know, and then you go through the different categories and you figure it out and you realize, okay, I'm spending in total $12,000 a month on my expenses. Yeah. But I'm only making $14,000 a month. Yeah. So I need to figure out how to increase or like separate that, right? So now how can I if I make the same 14, how can I now spend 10 or how can I spend 11?
Yeah.
Right. So now I have more profit, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And then now I have that. I'm using that money to pay off any debts that I have, right, from a personal perspective. Because as I pay off my debt, that gives me a raise. That gives me more money that I have in my pocket. Yeah. Right. So just things like that I think will help people.
Yeah. So I heard you say essentially value creation, learn how to create more value. And that's a core principle because I think, what's interesting, I saw a stat and I should have wrote it down because it would have been great to bring that up in terms of having so people can look it up. Yeah. But it was basically saying that Americans are we're fatigued with the word budget. Yeah. Like they don't want to hear budget anymore. Like we've been beat over the head, like have a budget, how to budget. So I think what that's telling me from a psychological standpoint is I think people know that. I think people understand that. I think they're even probably trying it at some point, but it's not, inflation. There's a lot of things that are impacting that, right? So obviously, your personal habits, how you view money, there are a lot of things, bad things that happen in your life, trauma, things that happen that we can't control, impact our budgets. But then also, like what you were talking to at first is, okay, well, how do you create more value out of your life? Right. That's the thing that I think we can coach people on because that maybe gives you a little bit more room to make mistakes. Yeah. That gives you a little bit more cushion, right? So when we think about the concept of how do you create more value, creating businesses, right? Creating side hustles, learning how to progress in your career so you can make more money, you can be more competitive. Those are things that aren't always necessarily the most obvious, you know what I mean? But people would say like, oh yeah, I should just do a better job at work. Well, how do you do that? You know what I mean? Yeah. So those are things that I think we need to have more conversations on. Like, how do you create value? I think we need to be teaching our kids how they can create value. Oh, yeah. How you can be a more integral part of society. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think those are things that I think are really important. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you, right? Because as you create more value, you generate more revenue. But I'm all about, like, if you're in business, how can you grow out of the side hustle phase, right? To where you have a legitimate business that you can employ others. You can potentially sell it in the future if you want to, so it's an asset like real estate. Yeah. Right. Where you could even use that money to buy other businesses and combine it with the business that you have. Yeah. So the value thing is so important. If you don't grow your business now, this beautiful podcast studio, you're not able to be a client of this person, right? That owns this studio. Right. Yeah. So it's like when you think about that and how you doing what you're doing creates more value. Because you literally could just be at home and not doing it, right? You could just stick to real estate, but you're doing more value by doing a podcast and being willing. I think a lot of times, do we have the willingness to do more is the biggest thing, you know? And once we have that willingness and we say to ourselves, you know what, it's not really about us and money, but how can I impact others? How can I be a blessing to others? Yeah. And then as I do that, the money is just going to flow automatically.
Yeah, I think people underestimate what you can do more. Yeah. And that comes with coaching. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You gave a great example of this out the gate. Yeah. Of you creating more value, right? I mean, you had to do that at self-preservation, right? Revenue is decreasing and your clients are saying, hey, we need this. So you had to make a pivot to stay alive, right? Yeah. What are some other ways that you've added more value in your life to be able to increase your income, increase your capacity for just, generosity, taking care of your family, teaching others? Kind of what were some of those things you did?
Yeah. Some of the things that come to mind, being more active on social media. Okay. Right. So that means either making posts, going live, and good. When you do that and people are seeing that, now social media, you're scrolling it and you're being entertained. But if I can slide some jewels in there for you to learn some things, then now you might have learned something on social media that you probably weren't thinking that you were going to learn. Yeah. Being available for questions, right? So whenever I make these posts, people normally have questions, so they'll send me a message. And, if it makes sense and I can answer it real easily, I'll answer it for them, Coming up, some of the things that I've done last year that I'm going to continue to do this year is what are the different areas of expertise that I have? Or what are people that I know that have expertise in certain areas that they have, and let me bring them live or let me bring them on a Zoom. And
collaboration.
Yeah. Absolutely. So now I'm inviting people for free to get this information, this value that I've gotten. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So now I'm creating more value. And now it's all about helping them to grow their business and helping them to grow their confidence. Yeah. Right.
That's good. So, and have you seen a direct impact on your business from your content? Has that increased revenue as you started doing more content, revenue increase? Was that kind of a direct correlation?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Really?
For sure.
Okay.
There's a direct correlation, specifically if you're consistent with it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you do it and then you like fall off or whatnot for like some months and then you come back.
Yeah.
I liken it to working out, right? So if you work out for like a week and then you fall off for like 2 months, you don't really see like the change or whatnot.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to keep going with it.
Yep.
And then, you know, as you do it, especially if you make really good content, people share it. So now people share it. You get more followers. You get more people that are DMing you, asking for information or advice. And so now you are impacting more people.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, I've definitely seen that in my life is the more value I'm putting out into the world, the more that comes back to me. And it never really comes back to me. Like you can't just press the button and make it happen. I think at some point you can, like especially in the content world, like when you get to a level of content where you have such a dialed in community that, you know, you can just press a button and it happens. You know what I mean? But for, you know, if you're just kind of getting started in your content journey, that consistency will definitely impact you. And you just got to be ready for it when it comes, right? So we were talking about budgeting. You know, a big icon in the budgeting world is Dave Ramsey, right? That's the word that he always comes up in most financial conversations. When we start talking about budgeting, Dave Ramsey comes up. What are your thoughts on Dave Ramsey's principles and their application to business finances, right? I think he's really great for people who are the person who is coming out of a ton of credit card debt and bad financial habits. I think Dave Ramsey's a lifesaver for that person. What do you think about his overall financial philosophy and how it applies to business?
Yeah, I think his philosophy is amazing for like personal finance. Okay. Because I'm aligned in that into where if you have debt personally, it's not the greatest thing. Right. So how can we eliminate our personal debt? Because if you think about it, whenever you take on personal debt, what's the return on investment that you're getting? You know, it's not necessarily like a return. And when I say return on investment, meaning is it generating income for you? You know, and if it's not, then it doesn't really make sense. Now, if you take those same principles and you apply it to business, I don't necessarily agree with it all the way, because if you do have an opportunity, let's say you have momentum in your business and you have demand and you have an opportunity to take a loan that could potentially help you to feed that demand. Now it makes sense. Right. Even if the interest rate might be, you know, undesirable, it still makes sense because you already know, okay, when I take this $100,000 loan, I'm going to turn that into $300,000, $400,000 because of the demand that I have. Right. Okay. You know, or if you have an opportunity, let's say, to buy someone's business, you know, you don't have the cash to do it. You can go to the bank potentially or SBA and get financing at, let's say, in this stage, 10% interest, you know, and now make that payment. And now you have a business that is cash flowing and is returning you money each month. Yeah. And then you already know real estate. Like if you take a loan for real estate and you're using that, let's say, to do an Airbnb, Verbo, or even a buy and hold type of situation where you have a tenant, now you're getting income from that and you have an asset. Yeah. You know, so for me, on the business side, when you're taking debt and you're buying an asset, now you are creating more cash flow for yourself.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's interesting that you brought up the real estate piece of it, because I was just talking to a business partner this morning, and I was telling him, you know, it's getting harder and harder to cash flow real estate right now because of, specifically in Houston, because of insurance going up. You know, interest rates are kind of hit this kind of stable. This is kind of the new normal for the year. I've been trying to communicate that to people. It's like, hey guys, this is what it is this year. So looking for other ways. So potentially investing in businesses, right? Like what kind of businesses could you look at that can potentially get you good returns on your money, right? And that could become assets. So, I mean, is there any particular business or asset class that you like from your own personal investments or just from just a business in general?
Yeah. Great question. I would say businesses that aren't popular, right? Like businesses where you have to get your hands dirty. Businesses that don't necessarily have automation and AI in it or may not need it to do the job, right? So I know people that buy plumbing businesses, HVAC, landscaping, things like that. I know in my industry, bookkeeping and accounting businesses are good businesses to buy because the margins are really good. You know, so we're in the process of buying one right now. And so, you know.
So talk us through that. What was why buy it? Analyze the business for us as much as you can for us. Yeah.
So you said why buy it? So why buy it? Because the person that's selling it already has already done a lot of the work to start it. You know, so if you're a business mind or someone that's good at business, you can go in there. I'll say I liken it to a fix and flip.
Yeah.
Right. So you have an asset that
it already
you can
exists.
go in that already exists, and you can go in there and make changes and make improvements.
Right.
And then now you have more value that you added to that business.
Okay.
You know, so in my situation, if there's other people out there that have bookkeeping or accounting businesses, and I go in and I buy, I can keep the employees in place and they're already servicing the client. So now it's passive. I don't necessarily have to be all up in there, you know, doing the work.
Okay.
And on top of that, I have specific knowledge to where I can, let's say, put in technology, right? I can do certain things the previous business owner isn't probably doing.
Gotcha.
That can help to not only increase the margin, but also increase the efficiency of operations.
Gotcha.
You know, so it makes sense. It fast forwards you versus starting a business from scratch.
So in this scenario, are you bringing that business under your own brand, or is it running as its own separate company, and you're just the ownership group behind it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, I would say, so it depends, right, on each specific scenario.
Okay.
There are some businesses that it makes sense to leave it separate for at least a year and then bring it in, you know, as you're learning the systems, the ins and outs, the clients. And it might not make sense to kind of shake up the table. Yeah. Because you might have clients say, you know what, this is too turbulent. I need to leave. Yeah. Right. So you want to figure out, you have to preserve the revenue that is being generated. But then at some point, it might make sense, you know, if you have, let's say, they call it in that space an integrator, someone that their sole purpose is, I'm going to integrate this business that was just purchased into the business that we have holistically. Okay. So they're aligning the different softwares that are being used, the different processes, systems, SOPs, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good. And for you, is this continue to expand your flywheel? When I say flywheel, for those who don't know, essentially you're creating wraparound services. Yep. So no one should ever have to leave your financial engine. They should come in for taxes. Now they're in CPA. Now they're in this. Now they're in this. Now they're you just keep them. So is that for you? Are you continuing to build to that, or are you just it was a great opportunity? The cash flow was there. Hey, let's do it. What was kind of your thought?
Most definitely. I think the flywheel definitely has a role to play in it too, right? Because there's so many services that you as a CPA can offer, right? We're talking about tax preparation, tax planning. If someone owes money to the IRS, tax resolution. Okay. You can also help people with bookkeeping, payroll, sales tax, franchise tax, like the list goes on. And so if you most likely have a client that's asked for any of those, right? So if you don't have the expertise, you can go out there and you can buy a business that already has expertise in that. Yeah. And now bring them into your fold, and then those clients now can be rolled to that company to handle all that for you. So it's like an extension of what you're already doing.
That's really good. You know, I have a lot of friends who own businesses that don't use CPAs, and a lot of times they don't use CPAs is because they're just trying to save money. Yeah. I've been using CPAs for the last 4 years, and I will say I've had a lot of friends who their business is doing way better financially than me. I learned so much from my CPAs, and that's the reason why I go. And I remember the first CPA that I ever hired, I was like, so why should I use you over Turbo? And she was like, you know, she asked me a bunch of questions that I didn't know the answer to. Yeah. And she was like, there's your answer. And I was like, oh, okay. So for me, I think it's really important. I mean, what's your answer to that? I mean, why, you know, what is the value of a CPA? And even just kind of for those who maybe haven't worked with one, kind of break down what is, and you just said it kind of high level, but kind of break down kind of what you guys do.
Yeah. A CPA should be able to do, well, CPA, fractional CFO, accountant, you know, it's all in the same sphere. Okay. But they should be able to do 3 things for you: help you to make more money, help you to save more money, and help you to save time. Okay. Right. Those are the 3 things that I always say to people. Right. Okay. So people are like, how can an accountant help you make more money? Well, when you think about it, a fractional CFO or an accountant should be able to analyze your financial statements, your income statement, your balance sheet, and let you know, like, hey, here's, based upon the labor that you have working for you, you're under capacity with all these people. So you still have opportunity to give your labor team more work without having to hire more people. So I helped you to understand, like, you can increase your revenue and keep your expenses the same. Right. So I've helped you make more money. Obviously, with saving more money, I can look at your income statement and see, you know what, here are the different expenses that you have, and let's have a call and let's go over them, right? And I always say, is each expense an expense or is it an investment, right? So when I say investment, meaning whenever you're spending something, is it returning you money? Yeah. You know, even when you look at your line item for your accountant or your lawyer, your HR, or even your employees, like, what's the return on the investment that you're paying out? You know, when you look at certain things, let's say even down to the line of what are you eating? Whenever you do a business meal, right?
Yeah.
If I take you to lunch,
yeah.
am I taking you to McDonald's or am I taking you to somewhere better, right?
Yeah.
That's going to feed our bodies and help us to have more fuel.
Yeah.
You know, so everything that you're spending, is it an expense or is it an investment?
Okay.
Right?
Got it.
So, yeah. And then obviously the saving more time, right? There's efficiencies that we can help you to see, you know, and we can help you say, you know what, you have the money to go hire an assistant. And now all these things that you're doing, you can move that to your assistant, and now you've bought back more of your time to focus on the revenue generating activities that you have, or to say, you know what, I don't have to do all these things. I can spend more time with my family and my friends.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So almost, I mean, it's kind of, you're almost kind of like a consultant, business consultant to some degree in that as well. I think the peace of mind, the reason I really appreciate working with CPAs is the peace of mind to know, hey, I have an expert on my team, right? And so somebody who knows what I don't know. So for me, it's kind of that, the anxiety of like, okay, am I doing the things the right way? And so that's something that I would add in the series, like, you know, and obviously the more complex your business is, there's, you know, that stress level might still be there, even what your CPA might add to your stress, you know what I mean? For some people's businesses. But so yeah, you know, one thing, a book that I read, a buddy told me to read is Profit First.
Yes.
And you guys are certified in Profit First, so I was really excited to hear that. So essentially, this system helps people keep more money in their pocket by retraining your discipline, specifically for entrepreneurs, but I think this applies to pretty much anyone. And the core principle of Profit First is that typically when you get paid, you pay your bills, you pay your expenses, and then you take whatever's left, right? What a lot of business owners get into is the rat race of like, oh, like, okay, I'm waiting on this bill, so I'm going to pay this on their credit card, I'm going to pay this, and then what ends up happening is you always never really have money to pay yourself, right? Or it takes a long time to get to the point where your business is profitable because you're constantly just paying out expenses, right? So what he challenges you to do is, you know, even start off with like 1 or 2% and just pay yourself first, and then, you know, build your business model so where you can get paid what you need to get paid off the front end. So if you pay all your expenses and you're not making enough money, then you have a bad business model. So he really challenges you that. He talks about you know, the envelope method, having multiple bank accounts and being able to spread your money out, put the money that you pay out in an account that you can't get to easily. So those are some really practical things. That book changed how I looked at my business. It changed how I did this podcast. It changed everything. I was like, oh, okay. Like,
it looks like you could teach it.
Yeah, I mean, bro, I'm very passionate about it because for me, it gave me a lot of freedom. And I know, like we talked about earlier, you know, a lot of Americans are fatigued with the word budget. The reason is because I don't think budget it's not synonymous with freedom to most people. Like, if you really were to have a budget, how free would you be to know, like, okay, hey, we can actually go do this and we're going to have money. You know what I mean? Most people just swipe the card and just hope it works out.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the anxiety of that actually isn't freedom, right? So I'm passionate about being able to say, okay, hey, now I can give joyfully and freely because I know we have a plan, right? And so it just frees things up. So talk about, I mean, I could go on and on about it. So I'm gonna let you talk about Profit First because you probably know more than I do about it. But talk about kind of why you believe in it, how you guys are coaching it, how you are using it in your business.
Yeah, so Profit First is a really good money management system for small businesses. Yeah, because when you think about it, in business, you don't make the same amount of money every single day or every single week or every single month. Right. And it's not like a job where you already know every 2 weeks, this is how much I'm going to get paid until I get a raise, that I'm going to get, you know, an increase. But it's never necessarily going to go down, right? But in business, it's up, down, up, down. So how do you navigate all that, right? So for so many years, I was trying to figure out what could be a good system that I could put in place for clients to where they could understand it easily and they could implement it. That would make sense for them. And I stumbled across Profit First back in 2019. You know, I read the book and I started to implement it in my business. And I started to see a change, right? To the point where by the time the pandemic happened in 2020, I already had cash reserves set aside. So it really helped me during that 2 months of, you know, like volatile revenue and the government not knowing what they were going to do. Right. So when I started to do that for my business, I was like, you know what, it makes sense for everybody else that comes in here to do it. Yeah. So we started to implement it with our clients, to teach them and train them on it. And they started to do it and they started to see results. Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of profit
What part
first.
of it was getting them the result? Is it the discipline aspect of it? Is it the legitimate? Is it the system? Kind of talk about that. Like how, I guess, give us an example of kind of how that played out.
Multiple things. The discipline definitely plays a role into it, right? Because with profit first, pretty much you're transferring money from your revenue account. So you have 5 bank accounts. You have your revenue account, your owner's pay, your tax account, profit account, and expense account. And your tax and profit account are savings accounts, and then the other 3 are checking accounts. So if you do it right, all the money that you make from the different merchants, like let's say Stripe, Square, whoever else that you collect money with, all goes into your revenue account.
Right.
And so now that account grows for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then let's say the first of the month comes, which March 1st, right? So on March 1st, you transfer money from that revenue account to the other 4 accounts. So you have different percentages. You transfer the money. So now the money that you transfer, you have that to spend for the next 2 weeks. So you got to get very creative with how you're spending. Right? So it's going to force you to make certain decisions financially to, let's say, cut your costs, right? Or if you've done a good job in cutting your costs, then now you have an overflow of excess money that you can now say, you know what, I'm going to reinvest this and I'm going to put this into a project to help grow the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the discipline part is important, but then also just the money management and the confidence in your money, right? As you're seeing your bank accounts grow every single 2 weeks, it gets you excited, you know?
Yeah.
Here's the beautiful thing about profit first, too. At the end of each quarter, however much money you have in your profit account, you can give yourself a bonus of 50% of that money, right? So you can literally use that money to, let's say, pay down debts that you might have in your business or in your personal life. Or you can give yourself that money to, let's say, if you want to take your family on a trip or do whatever, or give it to somebody that you love, you have the money to do that on top of paying yourself a salary. Right. So
That's
it really,
good.
now it starts to become a game. Now it starts to become like, okay, how can I make this work for me and increase my profit every single 2 weeks?
Right. And which that was a big thing that he talked about in the book was, I think the sneaky thing that some people even have good system, good budgets, the debt piece, people are having a hard time like putting that into the system, right? So with profit first, that, having that I guess that bonus revenue really helps you get ahead with your debt payment so that you're not, robbing Peter to pay Paul, which is what a lot of people, instead they were getting stuck in that. So, and that was, transferring something that I had kind of worked through last year, was trying to figure out, well, how do I invest in my business? I was using some credit, using some things. How do I balance it all? And so that really gave me a good system. And I love the quarterly payments. That's something that we even do, with this podcast. God really challenged us to be generous. And so we're like donating to nonprofits. And so it's really cool. Every quarter, we're just, the money grows. And then at the end of the quarter, we get to go to our nonprofit partners and give, you know what I mean? And that's just a lot of fun. And I love just getting to see the number get higher. You know what I mean? And before I've been generous before, but it was just like, okay, I could be generous if I had something left. You know what I mean? So I didn't really know how much now I know the number, right? And it's exciting to be able to go to our partners and be like, hey, this is how we're going to bless you this quarter. Whether it's a little or it's a lot, it doesn't really matter. But it's about building that system. And then as you add more value, like we talked about earlier, your capacity continues to grow. So
I want to add some things too. I love that you're doing that, right? That was one of the things that attracted me about coming on the podcast was that you had nonprofits that you were supporting. From a debt perspective, I think a lot of people, sometimes we want to just pay off everything quickly. But I love this system because just make that minimum payment every single month, right? Just don't worry about trying to, obviously the interest is going to accrue, but make that monthly payment, the minimum payment every single month, and then use that money in the profit account, the 50%, to now snowball it and pay it off sooner. Right? So if you have, let's say, 3 or 4 credit cards that have balances or loans, what's the smallest one? Let me attack that first. And then once that's paid off, let me attack the next smallest one and just keep going like that, and then over time, you get to pay off your debts without killing your cash flow. Because that's so important, right? Like sometimes we might come across a bunch of money and we'll say, oh, I want to pay off all this debt immediately. But you might end up needing that money in the future for payroll or to grow the business. So you got to be really careful with how you manage it.
That goes into trusting God too. And we both have faith journeys. And I think I've learned to trust God leading my finances. And for me, sometimes paying off debt was kind of this it was more so for security than, I'm being financially responsible.
Yeah.
And God really had a challenge, like, hey, do you believe that I'm going to provide for you? So whenever I switched my model, I was like, well, hey, I'm not like just let's just pay off the debt, pay off the debt. Yeah. Okay, well, dang, now everything's tight over here. Right. And it was like, okay, like, hey, let's balance things out. Let's get a plan together and let's really trust the process. So trusting God in your finances, I think, is so important. Yes. I think being able to have experts like yourself who can come in and can speak to you and tell you the hard things about your business that hey, this isn't working, man. Like, hey, you're not being smart with this. You know what I mean? So being able to receive that and not just suffer in silence and just try to figure it out. So being willing to invest in your business in that way, trusting God. And then also, like, I'm just going to keep belittling this point. It's just learn how to create more value for other people. Yeah. And you do that by expanding your current capacity. Yes. So you're never going to add more value in your comfort zone. So that's what I always challenge people. Like, hey, if you want to get better at marketing, get better at sales, grow your business, it's not going to happen where you feel comfortable. So you got to just get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think the profit first system will definitely make you a little uncomfortable when you first start, right? Because you're going to do things you haven't done before, right? So what would you say to someone who has money but isn't sure what to do with it? Because that's the other problem, right? You know, in Houston, a lot of Fortune 500 companies, there's a lot of high earners, people who got a ton of money in Houston and are just not knowing what to do with it. Like, how are you helping people? Like, you know, a lot of us, we've talked about is like when you're struggling financially, right? Yeah. What about when you're not? What about when things are going really good and God's blessing you? Yeah. How do you be smart with your money in that way?
Yeah, I would say, number one, what's your overall goal? Do you have, let's say a net worth goal, or do you have something that you're trying to reach, right? Let's say your net worth goal is $1 million in revenue in net worth, and you're at 200,000. Okay. You have an $800,000 difference and you have money. So what are some things that you could potentially purchase? What are some businesses, assets that you could potentially purchase to help you to close that gap, right? Yeah. Also working with professionals, right? Finding a professional that can ask you those tough questions, that can hold you accountable to the goals that you set, and that can introduce you to, let's say, other professionals that might be able to help you, like financial advisors. Different CPAs that can help you save in taxes, things of that nature. I would think would be the best thing for people that have money but don't know what to do with it.
Got it. The other thing they can do is you got a coaching program. Got the 8-figure focus. Let's talk about it. How is the 8-figure focus helping people approach their finances and business growth?
Yeah. 8-figure focus was something that was born in 2020 actually, during the pandemic on Clubhouse. I was one of the people that was on Clubhouse, and I was on there like all times of night.
Bro, Clubhouse is a social capital hack.
Yes,
I know multiple people who have built large followings off Clubhouse. Yes. So are you still on there?
I still have the app. Okay, we grew the group to like 44,000.
Okay,
you know, yeah, but I think everything happened so fast, you know. And it was one of those moments where it's like you gotta like be in the moment because you don't know if something like this will ever happen again.
Yeah.
But I was just going on there every day talking about different business challenges and different business experiences. And I was like, you know what would be a good title or like phrase for what I'm doing, right? And I came up with 8-figure focus. And a lot of people think it's about you want to have $8 million or $10 million, right? Because 8 figures is $10 million. But for me, the way I look at it is, if I want to grow my business to $10 million of revenue, that's a whole different person that I need to become. I need to personally develop. Yeah. I need to be uncomfortable. I have to wake up early, do all the things that you don't do necessarily at the level that you're probably at. Right. So what are the things that I need to, who do I need to become? And also another thing too, you can't get to 10 million in revenue without a team. Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of people we work with. They're like, oh, I don't want to hire people. Well, you're never going to necessarily grow to your true capacity. Yeah. Right. So if you have a team, you have to lead them, you have to manage them. You have to be emotionally intelligent to deal with, some of the things that happen. Yeah. That means also to that $10 million level, you have more clients. And so that's even more craziness, right? So who do you need to become? Who do you need to be? What are the things that you need to do to level up in your business? So we had a lot of conversations around that. And I was like, you know what? I want to keep this thing going. I want to definitely have discussions around these things because I know a lot of people are kind of lost in these areas. So how can we help people become better entrepreneurs?
Okay. Love it. From there, what are you building? Because I think that's a school group that they can join, right? In terms of so it's a coaching program. You can join there. So like coaching calls, video courses, that thing.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the next step? And this is kind of the question that I'm starting to ask all of my guests. There's a verse in Isaiah that talks about proclaiming good news to the captives, right? And I started noticing this phenomenon. When I would post on Facebook or LinkedIn that I did something, people would they just wanted to celebrate me, right? And I've done a lot to invest in my community, so I'm not naive to the fact that people want to see me win.
Yeah.
But I'm also just shocked because I add a lot of value, and a lot of times, I see people that they never like any of my content. And as soon as I post something good, they want to jump in. So I think people want to celebrate. They want to celebrate the good news. So what's the good news that's happening in your business that we can celebrate? What are you building that we can be a part of?
Yeah, no, great question. So, I have EFS Group, which is the fractional CFO firm.
Okay.
We're doing well. Like I said earlier, we have about 70 to 80 clients that we work with. Clients are, this is a tough environment, not just politically, but economically.
Yeah.
Right? Our president has had some tariff conversations. So we're
they go into effect today.
Literally goes into effect today, this Tuesday, right? So helping clients navigate that, right? Because if you sell a product and you import it from China or Mexico or wherever, that product has just now got, more expensive, right? So helping them navigate the price increases that they now have to do, helping them navigate the profit that they have to maintain. These are things that we're helping them do. We've had some clients, talk about, hey, this has been a tough time. You guys have really helped me learn more about what to do financially. So things like that I'm excited about. But even with 8-Figure Focus, the whole premise on school is, we do weekly to bi-weekly calls.
Okay.
Where, we train on different topics, whether it's insurance. We have, I can have you come on and talk about real estate, right? So we have experts in these different spaces come on and talk. And then I'll do trainings. Some of the trainings I've done back in the day were how to buy back more of your time. How to not have as much on your plate, right? Yeah. So, I read a good book called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell, right? Yeah. And so some of the principles in there is like, what is your buyback rate? So calculating that and being able to say, what, this is how much money I have to go hire someone to replace me to do these tasks. Yeah. So now I'm only not only am I creating more opportunity for someone else, but I'm also creating more opportunity for me to work in the areas that I really want to work in. Yeah. So we have these different trainings. We also have a money mindset person that comes on and talks with clients and just people in general every 2 weeks. So that's been good because, as you work with so many different people, there's so many different mindsets around money. You have some people that have a scarcity mindset. Yeah. You have some people that have a mindset of lack. So really having someone to talk to and having other people that you hear other people's stories and you're like, you know what, I'm not the only one going through this. Right. As a CEO, you have to literally be able to make quick decisions, right? Yeah. And if you make a bad decision, can you live with it? Yeah. Right? So those are things that we talk about in these sessions. Yeah, that's so good. We'll have all that information in the description. So 8-Figure Focus, information on how CPA services, fractional financial officer services, all the things that you guys are doing. Man, thanks for coming on, man. Yeah. I really appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you as a person, how you lead your family, how you really live your business, the content that you create. I think when someone's reputation precedes them in a room, that's always a good thing, right? So that was definitely what I experienced with you. So, man, thank y'all for watching the Blueprint Podcast today. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the comments wherever you're watching. Feel free to check out all the links, all the things in the bio. We'll see you guys next time.